Welcome into This is Baseball. It's been a little bit, but we are back this week because there's really some stuff that's been going down around the league that we need to get into. First and foremost, I want to spend some time talking about the contemporary era Hall of Fame ballot that just happened throughout this week and say congratulations to Jeff Kent for getting the necessary votes to get into the Hall of Fame. You needed 75% of the votes. There was a 16-member committee that participated in these votes, and Jeff Kent got 14 of the 16, so he was well above the 75% threshold that was needed. So other names that were on this list, players like Carlos Delgado, Don Mattingly, Dale Murphy, Gary Sheffield, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens. All of these are players that have gone through the process of their eligibility on the baseball writers ballot and going through that process and not getting elected. This is just another opportunity with a different set of eyes looking at these players' cases and giving them another chance. And Jeff Kent is one of those players that to me deserved another chance. When you look at his offensive numbers, you kind of scratch your head and go, why is he not in already? Because he's, from an offensive perspective, he's one of the best second basemen to ever do it. I would think that he was looked at maybe in a lesser light on as far as his defensive metrics are concerned, but let's just look at Jeff Kent and what his career numbers were. So Jeff Kent, again, congratulations. All-time leader in home runs for a second baseman, 377. And next closest was Rogers Hornsby. In that metric, just under 2,500 hits, a 290 batting average, 356 on base, 500 slugging, 1,500 runs batted in. So just a solid offensive second baseman that really should have probably gotten in on his eligibility with the baseball writers, but here we are. And just to look at the contemporary era committee and who some of the people are that have a vote on this, it's former players, former executives, current Hall of Famers. So you have Jim Kaat, Ozzie Smith, Alan Trammell, Robin Yount, players like that. And then some executives, Doug Melvin, Artie Moreno, Terry Ryan, and then you have Jason Starks in there. So there's a good group of people that get to do this. And one of the big kind of standouts, so Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens they always find themselves being the ones that are talked about in situations like this, because you either have a very strong opinion one way or the other of they should absolutely be in the Hall of Fame because they're the greatest to ever do it. Their numbers tell you that that's the case. Barry Bonds, home run king, blah, 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 blah. Roger Clemens, same thing, one of the greatest pitchers to ever do it, multiple Cy Young Award wins. But then you have people on the other side, like me, that are like, well, unfortunately, you didn't do it the right way, you cheated, and to me, there's really no place in the Hall of Fame for people that cheated, especially somebody like Barry Bonds that he was a great player before he cheated. He was a great player with the Pirates. He kind of saw what Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were doing and then got into that game. And here we are. Somebody that has a very complicated legacy. But Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens went through the baseball writers process. Baseball writers gave them their opportunities and said, you know what? We don't think that you're worthy of the Hall of Fame. So now they go to these alternate chances to get into the Hall of Fame with the Contemporary Eras Committee. And they've been voted down multiple times by the Contemporary Eras Committee. So what this tells me is baseball writers don't think you should be in if you're Bonds and Clemens, and your former and people that played the game, Hall of Famers, don't think that you should be in either. Bonds and Clemens only received 5 votes, which is a bad thing for them, because now they are not eligible for another chance to get into the Hall of Fame until 2031 on this Contemporary Eras ballot again. And in 2031, should they get get 5 votes or fewer again, then they are no longer eligible for the Hall moving forward. And I'm honestly, I'm kind of tired of talking about Bonds and Clemens every time that there's a Hall of Fame ballot, because it kind of waters down the players that do get in. Like, we're sitting here, Jeff Kent, who's a very deserving Hall of Famer, in my opinion, that should be getting all of the attention, and here we are talking about Bonds and Clemens. Funny thing about Jeff Kent is Jeff Kent played alongside Barry Bonds, so that was just a funny thing for me, was Jeff Kent got it and Barry Bonds didn't. But anyway, congratulations, Jeff Kent, Hall of Famer. But with that, let's move on. The winter meetings are underway. Winter meetings are where GMs, agents come together, and this is where things kind of start rocking and rolling in the offseason. This is where you start to see free agents sign with teams. This is where you see trades start to pop up. And I want to kind of get into what's going on, because there have been some stuff that's going down. I think the big name right now over the last few days, Kyle Schwarber got offered a contract by the Pittsburgh Pirates. And the Pirates have been trying this offseason. They've been in talks like the Ketel Marte sweepstakes, Kyle Schwarber. Now, whether it's we're trying and we're not giving reasonable deals, or we're not offering reasonable deals, that's a different thing. But it's nice to see the Pirates in these conversations. Now, Kyle Schwarber did go back to the Philadelphia Phillies, which is where he was last season. He signed a 5-year, $150 million deal with them. He is somebody that, he's boom or bust. He's home run, strikeout guy, but he's available. He does not miss games. He's somebody that a lot of teams would have loved to have had with on their team, and good for the Phillies. I hope that they keep the core together there with Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, and we'll see what happens with JT Realmuto. But congrats to Kyle Schwarber on the deal. Player that he's just a baseball player. He just kind of does his thing. You don't really hear much about him other than Kyle Schwarber has hit another home run again. He's just a lock for 50 home runs, 100 plus RBIs every season. More free agent news. The Dodgers, shocker, the Dodgers signed all-star closer Edwin Diaz to a 3-year, $69 million contract, which is the highest deal for a closer ever in Major League Baseball. Again, we're not going to pretend like we're surprised that the Dodgers gave somebody a lot of money. Edwin Diaz was with the Mets. He opted out of his deal after this season and went to test the free agent market. He was great in 2025, 163 ERA, 98 strikeouts, and 28 saves for the Mets last year. And really, this is good for the Dodgers, not so good for everybody else, because they kind of addressed a major weakness that they had in 2025. If you could really say the Dodgers had a weakness, one thing that they weren't really confident in was their bullpen, and now they have somebody on the back end that they feel really good about. If you remember watching the postseason, they were really kind of pushing the limits of their starters and trying to get them to go as deep as they could, because they just didn't have a reliable bullpen. And now here we are. Dodgers are trying to do something that is very, very rare in sports and go for a three-peat. So they they've shored up the back end of their bullpen. Now, this is a little bit older news, but just something worth talking about. Toronto Blue Jays, who lost in Game 7 in the World Series to the Dodgers, went out and got one of the top starting pitchers on the market. They signed Dylan Cease to a 7-year, $210 million deal to help out their rotation. This is a team that feels really good about where they're at, as they should. Went to the World Series, kind of exceeded expectations last year in basically every any way you look at it. So they feel like they can run it back. They feel like they have a window in the AL East and the American League as a whole to do some damage, and they're doubling down and they're going for it. They signed Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to a huge extension last offseason. Bring in Dylan Cease. We'll see what happens with Bo Bichette, if they can bring him back or if they're going to need to replace his productivity. But I like the aggression by the Blue Jays, and I like the idea of, let's go for it again. We were right there. Let's go into 2026 and put this thing away. And Dylan Cease is the highest free agent contract in Blue Jays history. I say free agent contract because Vladimir Guerrero signed the largest extension in Blue Jays history. Some people would say that it was a little bit of an overpay for Cease, but when you're in your window, you got to take risks, and that's what they did. Just some other names around the league that we're kind of waiting to see what happened. Kyle Tucker is the big name offensively that is on the market as far as a bat goes. Pete Alonso as well. Will he go back to New York? Is he going to go to Boston? There's a lot of different people that would love to have his bat in their lineup. So we'll kind of watch that as we go through these coming weeks. Maybe it'll happen in the next, I believe today is the last day of the winter meetings, so we'll see what happens there. MLB held its draft lottery for the 2026 draft that's held during the All-Star break, and the Chicago White Sox got the first overall pick, followed by Tampa Bay Rays getting second. Minnesota Twins are the third pick. For the Kansas City Royals, they ended up with the 6th pick in Major League Baseball's draft. They were slated for like the 13th, but they ended up with 6. So really good for them. Congratulations to the White Sox. Hopefully you guys can finally figure your life out and stop being horrendous. It was good catching up today. I'll be back in a couple weeks to just stay caught up on what is going on around Major League Baseball around the offseason. I'm sure we'll have a lot of transactions going around. I will hear more about the World Baseball Classic that is coming up in March, and maybe some news about the Kansas City Royals Stadium that we've been kind of following for the last year and a half, and maybe some collective bargaining agreement talk if anything happens with that, because that's going to be a very, very major topic over the next 12 months. So it'll all be right here. Thank you for listening today. We'll see you in the next one.